Sophie and I love books.
I'm Rudi and I love movies, and welcome to the very first episode of It Was a Book First, a new podcast about book-to-screen adaptations. Today we're traveling deep into space to discuss Project Hail Mary, Phil Lord and Chris Miller's adaptation of Andy Weir's 2021 novel starring Ryan Gosling, Sandra Hüller, and puppeteer James Ortiz. But before we get to that, we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves and why we're launching this podcast.
Rudi, so excited to be here with you. We are absolutely thrilled to be launching this into the world. I'm Sophie Vershbow, a freelance journalist writing about books, literary culture, and the publishing industry at places like Esquire, New York Magazine, Elle, and The Atlantic. I also spent a decade working in Big Five publishing at Simon & Schuster and Random House, where I ran social media for 7 years. When I left publishing 4 years ago, I decided to turn my interest in the industry and all things books into my writing career. And so now I like to explore both the books that are coming out as well as how they relate to the industry as a whole.
Sophie, super excited to be with you today to launch our podcast. I am Rudi Greenberg. I'm a freelance journalist who spent a decade covering movies, music, TV, comedy, all things entertainment and events at the Washington Post. And for the last 4 years, Sophie and I have been working together doing marketing at a tech company. And unfortunately, we got laid off from our jobs earlier this year. But that's okay, because when we found out we were getting laid off, we thought, what can we do together to kind of keep the conversations that we were already having at the beginning of meetings going? And, Sophie, you and I, when we met virtually, but then we actually got the chance to meet
Multiple offsites now.
in person very quickly.
Lots of tech
after
fun,
you,
lots of team building.
Very quickly after you joined, we got the chance to meet in person, and I remember we kind of bonded over both really liking David Byrne, Bravo reality shows, and just like journalism and like pop culture in general. So when we found out we were getting laid off, I kind of pitched you this idea randomly one day. I knew that you were super into books. I am super into movies. I know we both love TV. And I thought, how can we kind of combine our shared interests and do something cool with it?
I was pretty excited. I made a deck and a sheet, a Google
You were
sheet within 24
right away.
hours.
Yeah.
I thought, how can we take every tech skill that I've been putting into really annoying projects into something I care about? And that is how we got this podcast.
And we were in a moment at that time, and still are, where it really felt like book adaptations were having this kind of outsized impact on pop culture, right? As we were starting talking about this podcast, the Oscar nominations had just come out or were just about to come out, and out of those, we had, I think, 4 of the 10 Best Picture nominees were based on books, and the ultimate winner, One Battle After Another. We have had box office hits that were based on books. The Housemaid was a big surprise hit last year and early this year. Reminders of Him and the extended Colleen Hoover cinematic and book universe.
We will be covering.
Yes, we will. Wuthering Heights, an example of a very old book getting adapted in a new way. And then just what's coming out. I mean, we have The Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's big epic that's probably going to make $1 billion coming out this summer. We have Verity, another Colleen Hoover book. We've got Dune Part 3, one of the big sci-fi releases at the end of the year. And then like every other streaming series kind of seems like it's based on a book, whether that's Heated Rivalry. And
you really pitched me this during Heated Rivalry Mania, which, I think probably one of the biggest adaptations we've ever seen.
Just the rabid obsession over that book. And it's not just that. We've got a Cape Fear adaptation out right now that we will cover. Every day I feel like you and I are sending each other texts or Instagram posts back and forth of like, oh, this thing's getting adapted. Oh, this thing adapted, and this cool person is in it. And we're in this moment right now, right? Books are the original IP.
And they also really come with a built-in audience. And I think with the boom of things like Book Talk and really the fact that so many movies are coming from a Marvel or a DC, and they're really this sort of repeated IP. And so this is a way to not have original movies, but have something come with this built-in audience that comes from a piece of IP that already exists. And so we're really going to be looking at what gets adapted and why. Why are certain things being adapted more now? Why are adaptations honestly coming out seemingly faster and faster?
Yes.
which we're seeing a lot happen, and how are decisions like casting changes or plot changes happening in relation to the larger cultural conversation and to what the industry thinks we want coming out of a heated rivalry. Are we seeing more romances? That is the kind of conversation that we're going to be having on this podcast.
And what's really cool about how we're going to approach this podcast is that you have audiences kind of coming at these TV shows or these movies or these books in different ways, right? You have the people who
Mhm.
have read the book and they are devotees and they are like, they better not screw this up. And then you have the people like me who are coming at this from, oh, here's like a new thing for me to watch. I maybe have some association with the book, but also I don't really care. I just want to watch something that kind of feels like an original story. And so, how we're going to approach this podcast is kind of in the way that most people consume this entertainment. So, Sophie, you
I will be
are the
reading the
book
book.
expert based on your background, obviously.
I am definitely the person who says you have to read the book first. That is the only way to operate in the adaptation world. And so I am very much going to be the person operating that way. I'm going to read, perhaps with the exception of the Odyssey, there will be an abridged version. But in almost all cases, my promise is that I will be reading the source material and really reporting to Rudi on what all the changes are. And then, Rudi, you're going to come at it from the perspective of someone who hasn't read it to really judge it, I think, as an original piece of art. And I think something that's been really fun for us as we've been recording episodes that you guys are going to hear soon is to see how different those opinions often are when you have or have not read the source material and have that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, it's like, are you coming at this with the baggage of the book? Or are you coming at this
I come
as
out of the
like
baggage.
a fresh faced, like, hey, here's a cool new story? And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an exciting way to approach these stories because what's also happening, which I think is really cool, and we saw this with Heated Rivalry, is that these adaptations are actually turning viewers into readers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really cool perspective. And, you might get to hear my opinion occasionally on whether or not am interested in reading the book or will be reading the book after watching the thing. And you're also going to get Sophie's opinion on which one she thinks handled the story better. Not only are we approaching this from different perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we also have some shared tastes, but also some very different tastes in what we
Definitely.
like out of entertainment.
So I would say my profile as a reader, I am proud to say that I probably read at least 30% nonfiction now. That used to be a really different split, but I am primarily a novel reader. I am definitely someone who would consider myself like a big like literary fiction reader, if that's what
Sure.
you'd like to call it. I will say I am not a big romance reader, which is
Mm,
something that's really interesting, I think, for me to tackle on this podcast. And is something I'm like excited to engage with more. I have never read a Colleen Hoover book. I think as someone, I will admit that my taste maybe skews a little bit more middle and highbrow. And so I think, what I'm really interested in this podcast is that maybe some books that I've judged, like Colleen Hoover books, I'll be, in full admission of that. I'm really curious to see what my reaction is to them and to sort of be forced to engage with them in a way I might not have otherwise. Which is, I will also say, so in terms of nonfiction, I love anything that's like a spotlight, Erin Brockovich, like we are getting
sure.
stuff done, like competence porn, you might call it. So I love movies that actually take like really engaging nonfiction articles or something like
Sure.
Bad Blood or Killers of the Flower Moon or these books that are really like journalistic explorations and turn them into movie projects. That's one of my favorite adaptation types.
And, you just mentioned one of my favorite movies of the last several years, Killers of the Flower Moon. I definitely will say that I do have some film bro tendencies. So
Yeah.
I apologize for that in
Thank you for the
advance. I mean,
disclosure.
my favorite movie of last year was One Battle After Another. My favorite movie of the previous year was
Great
Dune
movie.
Part 2. My favorite movie of the year before that was Killers of the Flower Moon. So, these are definitely leaning in that direction. But I think my taste might surprise some people. I obviously
And
like a
for
little
people who don't
more.
know
Oh,
you, Rudi, I gotta just interject and say you are one of the widest viewing people I've ever met. That can you just share with people very genuinely the number of movies you watched last year?
Sure. I think I saw like 175 movies last year
So
or something like that. And then another maybe like, dozen or two
you
TV shows.
watch and engage really widely. And
I
so I
do.
always find that you have a very educated opinion of having engaged with a lot of stuff, which I
Uh,
appreciate from
yeah.
my film bros.
I like to try to watch a little bit of everything. And I think that sometimes I surprise myself in what I like. Like you, not only have I not read a Colleen Hoover book, I've never seen a movie based on a Colleen Hoover book.
I
And
don't think
so
I
I
have
am
either.
interested to see when we do check out Verity later this year, what that's like because I've heard about it, but haven't
Sure
actually
have.
engaged with that. I think between the two of us, there's going to be a lot of common ground and a lot of things that we both kind of like or have shared interests
Hmm.
in. But then we're also going to diverge, and that's what kind of makes this podcast exciting. And so, the way we're going to approach each episode, for the most part, is we're going to cover a different new adaptation each week. We'll kind of go through the history of the book a little bit, how the adaptation came together. We will run through the plot of, the movie or the TV show, and then also talk about some of the differences. So I will say this, we'll say this at the top of every episode, but we're going to say this now.
Spoilers.
We will be spoiling
Spoilers.
everything that we cover on this show. So if you have not read or watched the thing that we are talking about, just know that it's going to be spoiled for you.
We will do our best for things where there's going to be maybe a second season, if
Sure.
there's like really big spoilers in the book that aren't necessary. But we are going to talk about what is necessary to chat about the changes that they made and why. And that is often going to include very large plot points.
Yes. And then we will also be doing some interviews. We will be talking to screenwriters. We'll get some actors on here eventually. We'll be talking to other writers, authors about the process of
Mhm.
adaptation, about some of these works that we're seeing out in the world.
So, we're also going to be talking to what we consider industry insiders. So, different journalists who are reporting on this and really looking at the trends across the industry. We're also going to talk to different people, I'd say, like in the crafts of how these things come together, like cinematographers, costume designers, about how you really take what's on the page and visually create it into that movie or TV world.
We'll be releasing new episodes every Wednesday. You can expect at least one episode a week. For the most part, we'll cover a couple of movies or TV shows each month, along with one episode or so that has a guest.
But today we're going to be launching with 2 episodes. So the one you're listening to right now is for one of the biggest adaptations of this year, which is Project Hail Mary. The second episode is going to be covering Margot's Got Money Troubles, which is a new series on Apple TV.
The episode that you're listening to today was actually recorded right after Project Hail Mary was released. And we're recording this intro today about 3 months after the movie was released. And I think it's been interesting, Sophie, to see kind of the long tail of
Oh,
this
yeah.
film. Like, it is still something I'm seeing people talk about. I literally got served up a Instagram post yesterday about someone talking about one of the differences from
Mm.
the book and the movie. I saw that horror director Mike Flanagan logged the movie on Letterboxd yesterday, so people are still watching it. This movie is huge. If you somehow haven't seen it, it is still playing in a few theaters.
Crazy.
Amazingly, it's made $343 million domestically, $681 million
Holy crap.
worldwide. It's the third highest grossing movie of the year. It has maintained a 4.3 on Letterboxd, which is a pretty high rating, despite having 1.5 million logs. So this is a very popular movie. If you somehow have not seen it, like I said, maybe you have a theater that's still playing it. It is actually coming to the MGM Plus streaming service tomorrow, the day after this episode is released. So for the tens of you who subscribe to that service, you can watch it there or you can rent it on PVOD.
After listening to this episode, make sure to go download our Margot's Got Money Troubles episode, and then you can subscribe to our feeds wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at It Was a Book First Pod, on TikTok at It Was a Book First, and on YouTube at It Was a Book First Podcast, where you can watch a full video episode of this. You can also visit our website, itwasabookfirst.com, or email us with questions, comments, or to reach out about upcoming releases at itwasabookfirst@gmail.com.
Tune in next week when we discuss Hulu's The Testaments and A24's horror mega hit Backrooms.
And you get to find out how we connect those two very different projects.
Now join us as we go from page to screen with Project Hail Mary. Let's talk about Project Hail Mary. So Project Hail Mary, it's the first movie from Lord and Miller in some time. The last movie they kind of made was Solo, a Star Wars story, which is the Han
Mhm.
Solo movie that they kind of filmed half of, and then they got fired and Ron Howard took over. So they haven't made a movie in a while. They've been working on this for a long time, and they have another project that is very close to this that we'll talk about that they're also working on. It's been a huge smash. It is a beloved, fairly recent novel. The story in sort of like short terms is
Sure,
science
that's a
teacher,
tough
yes.
one.
Science teacher Rylan Grace wakes up on a spaceship light years from home with no recollection of who he is or how he got there. And it's a lot more than just that, but that is the basic premise is you're going to be
Mhm.
watching Ryan Gosling on a spaceship trying to figure out why he's on the spaceship. And it's been huge. It's been really anticipated. It's nice to see a movie like this come out in March and be
Mhm.
successful, which we don't really see that much. And Sophie, you actually have a bit of a personal connection to the Andy Weir book, don't you?
Yeah, I worked at Ballantine, which is part of Penguin Random House when this came out in 2021, which is really representative of how many books I worked on in that time that I barely remember the experience. And I'm like, I know I photographed this at some point and put it up on the Random House Instagram account, which I used to be
Yeah.
responsible for. But it feels like a fever dream. But yeah, Andy Weir is obviously a huge name sci-fi author. The Martian originally, I believe, was self-published and then became this
Yeah.
huge blockbuster success. The movie was huge. His second book, Artemis, was not as belovedly received at all. It was really a flop, I think, critically and commercially. And then
Interesting.
Project Hail Mary came back super strong, and it was a huge hit for Ballantine. I think it was nominated for a Hugo Award, which is the big sci-fi award that year. It won an Audible book award for best audiobook. It was a big sci-fi book out that year in
And
2021.
you loved the book, right?
I love the book. I read it a couple years ago on recommendation from a friend. Shout out to my friend Pam, who sold this book to everyone and has not been wrong.
Wow.
And I
Shout out,
basically
Pam.
read it in, yeah, shout out Pam. But I basically read it in one day on the beach on a vacation a couple
Amazing.
years ago. I loved it.
You talked about how you were binging Strangers and the reading that and you read this in a day. Is that kind of how you typically read books? Are you like I am just gonna blaze through this as fast as possible? I mean, I assume when you really like it.
It's my preferred method of reading. Like my
Okay.
ideal day is I wake up, I sit down on a beach, I start a book, I finish the book, I leave the beach. Like that's my
One
ideal
day.
day. That's sort of what my family does like in the summer when
Yeah.
we go away for a couple
You and
weeks.
Jacob Elordi.
Yeah, it's a good person to share the habit with. But yeah, that would be my preferred. Obviously, I do not do that for every book. I have a life, but yeah, that's my preferred method.
Okay. Well, what did you think of the adaptation?
I thought the adaptation was wildly successful. And yes, I think it's a great movie, but the fact that they were able to adapt a book this complex into the movie is what's so shocking to me. And Rudy, there's no way for you to know this without reading the book, but so much of the book is physics and math and things that, quite frankly, I don't care about normally at all. And there's a million funny like book talk bookstagram people online right now making joke videos of like I failed math class but like I'm solving the astrophy problem,
Sure.
and it's kind of what it feels like to read it. So I can sit here gushing about it forever, and there's a lot of reasons I'll get into about what I think makes it successful, but I'm curious, what did you think coming into this cold? What do you think of the movie?
Yeah, I think it's this is an interesting one for us to talk about in that regard because you obviously had the backstory of the reading the book, you knew what was
Mhm.
coming, and I came to this really as just I've heard this book is really popular. I saw this trailer many times. I think I saw Crime 101, which is another same studio, Amazon, MGM, put like a 5 minute sort of like the opening scene of the movie. They
Oh,
played it
cool.
before that movie, so I had seen that. So I there was a lot of hype going into this. I also watched The Martian for the first time the night before, and that's
Mhm.
the 2015 adaptation of
Had you
another
seen
the
that
Andy Weir book.
before?
I had not. That was my first
That's so
exposure to
surprising.
Yeah, it kind of passed me by. And that's Matt Damon. Interesting because in the end, these are kind of similar stories. There's a lot of, and
Very.
what we can talk more about some of the similarities and sort of how they differ and why maybe they're more successful in different ways. I liked Project Hail Mary. I did not love Project Hail Mary.
Damn.
Like I think it is a good
Okay.
movie. I think the craft is really admirable. The way that they built the sets, the way it's shot. It is a beautiful looking film.
It's amazing.
It's very well done, but I think I nitpick a little bit at some of how it's very much in debt to a lot of other movies that have come before it. And that's okay.
Oh,
You know, it has
interesting.
Interstellar vibes, has ET vibes,
Hmm.
has 2001 A Space
Arrival.
Odyssey,
I saw a lot of
Arrival.
Arrival in this.
There's a lot of what we've seen before, and I think maybe that I pushed against that a little bit. I
Okay.
was a little like, show me something new. And there are some things that it does. It's I think we're gonna have an interesting discussion because this is maybe the first time that we've sort of disagreed. And it's like sort of a
Yeah.
slight disagree. I will probably come off more negative than I actually feel about this movie because I think I wanted this to be like amazing. I wanted this
You
or
saw a lot of
amaze,
hype.
amaze,
I mean, it
amaze.
was
Yeah.
even by the time amaze, amaze, amaze. Even by the time you saw it, it was already really hyped.
Yes. So again, good movie, good Gosling, good performances, like looks great. I just have some nitpicks about it.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, I also watched this movie in like not ideal circumstances. So I did see it at a sold out IMAX screening, or almost sold out, which was incredible. The most people I've seen in this theater since I started going there a couple years ago.
That's
Like it
awesome.
was every seat except for like the first two rows was full, which is
I
insane. I
love
just
it.
have not seen that in a long time. Um, Unfortunately, I woke up that morning with extreme neck pain, almost as if I had woken up from a deep
A large
space
coma.
travel induced coma
Yeah.
and didn't know how to use my muscles anymore. So I was in a lot of pain sitting upright watching this
Rudy.
movie. I also may have ingested a little too much of a substance that made me feel as if I was in space. So you know, for anybody out there who enjoys a little edible, I just suggest that see how much is in it before you take it. Unlike
I
me, who
honestly
accidentally took
wish
too much.
I wished I had been more stoned for this movie. Like it would have been a great movie to experience in that way.
It
I did
and
not
it
see it in
was.
IMAX, which was a bummer. I kind of want to go back and see it in IMAX just because
You
those
should.
visual effects are so breathtaking. But like I was not on substances, and when he is like floating in that pink astrophage, I was also having a moment. I'm not gonna
Yes,
lie.
that was a very cool moment, and I think about 45 minutes in, I realized I had taken a little too much and had to kind of readjust and just go, okay, you're going to be fine. You're in space, but you know, we're
You're
not
in
going anywhere.
space.
We're here. We're here for the duration. So it all worked out. I too actually almost went to go see it again, but honestly, it's kind of hard to find a ticket to go see it. It's like pretty
Especially
packed.
for IMAX. It's very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
It's great to see how many people are going in theaters. Like, this is undeniably one of those movies that you should watch in a theater with people. This is not meant to be viewed on your phone, on your
Yes.
little TV at home. It's remarkable. And I think, too, reading the book a couple years ago, I remember thinking, like, first of all, there's no way this doesn't become a movie. It will be a huge
Mm,
blockbuster. And I remember pretty quickly after that, Ryan Gosling was announced. And we should say that he was actually attached to this before the book even came out. So before, I was taking pictures of it
right.
for Instagram, he had read a manuscript and was already attached. And I think what's very cool, and you're going to have to allow me to get a little schmaltzy, a little corny on this
Sure.
pod, because what I love about this movie is that it was this Herculean task to get it made. And I would really recommend that anyone listening to this who hasn't sort of seen some of the behind the scene videos and just photo visuals of what the different sets and contraptions they built and different
Totally.
techniques they use to go really read about that. And I feel like the Herculean effort to make this movie matches the feeling of like the Herculean effort to save Earth, which you are
For sure.
experiencing in a much more intense way by reading it over. I think this is like almost a 600-page book. It's like it's a long one. You're in it. And so I found watching such a successful product of all that effort and that matched experience to just be very moving. And I've found myself really
Yeah.
moved this week learning more about how it was made.
It's interesting you say that because I think one of the both compliments and criticisms I've heard about this movie is that it's competence porn. Like,
Yep.
not just from the sense of what you're talking about, the construction and how they pulled this off and how tactile and real everything
Mhm.
film feels down to Rocky himself. But also in the story. And a lot of Andy Weir's stories, it seems, are kind of about people getting together and doing
It's
things
his whole goal.
competently. That
Yeah,
is, and it's very interesting in 2026, which is something we will talk about, how that plays in
totally.
our current state of things, and maybe is why I brushed up against it a little bit or couldn't fully embrace it, is because of some of the real world creeping in. We're gonna obviously, as we do on every episode, we are going to spoil Project Hail
We're
Mary, the book
definitely going to
and the
spoil
movie.
it.
My understanding is that the book and movie hew pretty close together, so you're going to be spoiled
Very.
either way if you haven't seen or read this work before. So if you don't want to be spoiled, just step away, come back.
Yeah.
If you would like to be spoiled, cool, hang out.
Yeah.
We'll spoil it for you. Um, all right. So we're now going to get into spoiler territory. Sophie, I thought we could do like a quick, kind of loose plot summary of what sort of happens, the big kind of points before we get into talking about some of the differences, some kind of behind the book
Mhm.
stuff, and then of course our observations as we go. So this film opens with uh, Ryan Gosling's character awakening from a coma, kind of is unable to use his body, is unable to talk, trying to figure out what's going on. And it's a cool scene. I mean, I really like
Yeah.
him sort of like discovering everything, trying to learn about the crew members who
Mhm.
are, clearly dead on board. And the film kind of goes back and forth between that as he's sort of like regaining consciousness, regaining his brain, his intelligence, his understanding of himself, and flashbacks that I presume are meant to be what he's sort of remembering
Exactly.
as it's going. And so we're kind of introduced to him X number of years earlier as a middle school teacher.
A really fun one.
Yes.
I would have been pretty crazy about Ryan Gosling as my middle school science teacher.
And he's played a teacher before. Half Nelson, I think he played a teacher.
Yeah,
Um,
teacher on heroin.
a little bit different.
A little
Um,
different.
this one is a teacher that's more high on
Feel
life
good.
or
Yeah.
space. But yeah, so he's kind of teaching these kids. He gets sort of like stopped by Sandra Huller's character, who seemingly is
Best casting.
kind of like in control of protecting the world. It kind of feels
She
like. I
sure
mean, I
is.
think I
Yeah.
think she works for America, but in some higher up regard, it's never really specified what her role is. But essentially, she's like,
It's not
get in
for
the
us to
car.
know. It's
Yeah,
need to know information.
yeah.
It's like made even more clear in the book that she is basically omnipowerful. Like she
Okay.
can control. There's a lot of scenes that were taken out of the book
Mm,
actually that are like proving how powerful she is and the fact that like
okay.
she can just get whatever she wants from any government and people have to say yes to her.
And if you haven't seen Anatomy of a Fall from a couple of years ago, which was kind of a
Yeah.
big breakout in America, please do. It's an incredible film. One of my favorites of a very good year. She's great in that. She's great in this as well. So basically, the sun. You can explain this pretty well, Sophie. Right? Like the
Yeah,
sun is being
I
eaten.
got it. Any of my high school or middle school science teachers right now are like, "Oh my god, fear. She's about to try to explain science." So basically what's happening is that the sun is dimming because these extraterrestrial sort of little beings called astrophage, which are the like black sludge in the movie, are eating the sun essentially. They're feeding on it. And so through a series of, telescopes or whatever, they figure out that there's a planet that is not being dimmed by the astrophy. And so they send Ryan Gosling and the other scientists on a mission to go there and try to figure out what's happening. And when they go, it is very much seen as a death mission. So there's not going to
Yes.
be enough fuel for them to get back. They're going to send probes back with the with whatever they find with their scientific findings, and then they are going to die in space. And so much of the book is really how it plays out in the movie. I mean, the book opens in the same way where you're sort of discovering it. It's very fun to sort of uncover the mystery along
Sure.
with Ryland Grace, especially in the book. It goes, I very much understand why they sped up everything, like of all the
Mm.
stuff that made
So it's a bit
sense. They move
slower in the book.
it really is slower. And like you are
Okay.
playing detective, you are seeing these flashbacks
Mm.
and figuring out like little bits by bits with
That's
him.
interesting because yeah, I think you sped a little bit through what actually happens, but that's okay. I mean, that's
Yeah, I'm
essentially
sorry.
like
That
we
was my
we learn
summary.
this over. No, it's okay. We learn it over the course of the movie. Like he is a former molecular biologist who is kind of a specialist in the types of uh it's something involving what astrophysics. I don't
Water,
know. A
something
lot
to
of
do
the
with
science is yada
water.
yada. Yeah, something to do with water. Since they yada yada it in the movie, we can yada yada it here.
Ryan Gosling said that he had Andy Weir in his ear in certain scenes where he's supposed to
Oh my
explain
god.
science, literally reading it to him because he was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying.
So we watch him kind of like test the astrophage, like they're trying to understand if it's living, and he runs all these tests and figures it out, and we get this great segment with him and Lionel Boyce from The Bear.
Great scene.
Great scene. Like they and the two of them are basically just like going to the hardware store to try to like do their own little tests. And I really liked Lionel Boyce in this. He's a little bit
Hmm.
different from his character in The Bear, and I actually took me a while to realize that it was him because he's kind of playing a little bit against
Hmm.
type. And I wanted more of him. He kind of leaves the movie kind
I
of early
agree.
and quite wasn't quite enough, but I understand it's sort of the story. And so they start essentially working on this plan to figure out how to
Save the
save the
world.
earth. And so as this is happening, we're also learning about uh Grace's uh current is present on the ship. And sort of the big reveal of the book, and I want to know, Sophie, like how much of a surprise this was for you, how long it takes to get there. It happens fairly quickly in the movie. It had been spoiled by the trailers, is that he ends up in a sort of, I guess, near another planet. He notices that there is a planet that isn't impacted by the astrophy, and there's a ship there. We get some really cool shots of the ship, like kind of building what appears to be
I
like
love
almost like
that.
wooden
Yeah.
things, but I think they're a little stronger than
It's
wood.
metal.
Metal,
It's
yeah.
actually an element that we don't
Space
have
metal.
here on Earth. I forget the name, but it's
Oh yes,
specific
something
to
with an
those
X,
people.
maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
That feels right.
And then he starts getting like messages from this ship in the form of kind of like a metal canister. And eventually the other ship sort of builds a safe passage for him to walk through that connects the two ships through glass, and we meet an alien,
Rocky, Rocky, Rocky. I
a
love
little
that little
alien
guy.
who
He's so
is
awesome.
looks like a rock, or a collection of
A
rocks.
rock
So
spider.
Grace
That's how
names
he's
him
kind of described, as like a
Rocky.
spider made of rocks.
And it's a very cute moment. I mean, this is
I
when
love
it's
it.
very clear, like, oh, this is borrowing ET, this is borrowing from
This is a
Arrival,
buddy
like,
comedy, basically.
yeah. So in the book, how long does it take to get to Rocky? How surprised were you that we're meeting an alien? I've heard a little bit about how he describes meeting an alien in the book, because I believe the book is like more told first person, right? Through his like
Yeah,
thoughts.
it's just all through his thoughts. I mean, throughout the book, that's what I mean. Like, you're really solving the problems and like everything from like, hey, I need to get this canister an alien just threw me. Like, you are there in the problem solving, whether or not you understand the physics and the math of it or not. It's really, really satisfying. I actually love how I wrote down a quote from Andy Weir on this in a New York Times interview. He said, I just need the reader to understand enough of the science to understand why it's a problem for the character and why their solution is a solution. So if you've never heard of relativity, I would say the faster you go, the slower time goes for you, but I wouldn't try to explain the math. And I
Okay.
feel like that's a great example of some of what I lost. And I'll answer your question in a second, but I feel like that's some of what I lost in the movie was like understanding why he was going out in a certain way to like capture something or why he was trying to do the thing that he was trying to do.
Sure.
In terms of Rocky, it's all really paced the same way,
Okay.
movie and book. I'd say, like, maybe a third through you get Rocky, and another third through is when you find out like the second big reveal about him and how he ended up on the ship. Like it's all
Sure.
really similarly paced. I think that when I read the book and I was thinking about the adaptation, Rocky was the number one thing I was like, how's that going to work?
Yeah.
Like, how are they going to do that? That's so
Well,
ridiculous
and it
sounding.
feels like they knocked it out of the park. And they
They
did that
crushed it.
again through
Practical effect?
tactile practical effects. For the most part, Rocky is a puppet
A puppet.
who is puppeteered by James Ortiz, who also does the voice. And there are a number of puppeteers. I believe they called them the
Mhm.
Rockettes on set, who puppeteer this very lifelike rock puppet. And sometimes he is, I believe, CGI, and there are some scenes where you can tell why they would need to do that. But for the most part, it
Sure.
feels real. And I believe that James Ortiz was acting against Ryan Gosling when they were filming those scenes. So it does have this authenticity to it that I think is really great.
Kind of can't believe how well it worked. Like I can't believe that this rock got me. But like I was very moved by the rock. And I just thought it was
Well, it's crucial,
great.
right? It's like the most,
It's
if you don't
the
buy into
whole
Rocky, you kind of lose the emotional weight of the movie.
it's the only person he has to play off for the whole thing, for the space
The
scenes.
only
And so
thing,
it's
it's not even a person.
yeah. And also for, the ending to resonate, you
Right.
need there to be
Right.
real emotional weight to that. And so yeah, I think they did a really phenomenal job. I thought Rocky was great. I will say one place where I felt the sped upness was in the language portion, the
I
arrival
was
portion.
I was gonna bring that up too.
It You really believe it that they know how to talk by the time they know how to talk in the book, and I
It
did
happens
not
really
believe it in
fast
the
in the movie.
movie.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
happens way too fast. Like, so
He
tell me, how does
explains
that change in
it.
the book?
It's not that you so it's something that they do a great job of is, like, it's not that it's not in the movie, but it's, like, a shot of, like, one computer with a thing happening versus, like, 5 pages of
Sure.
explaining the technology. And so I think it has to do with, like, whale sounds and, like, translating those. And so they're speaking at sort of like an echo frequency. And please,
Uh-huh.
someone who read the book more recently, do not write, not that we have a place to write in yet, but do not write in and tell me that that's wrong. I'm pretty sure it was around like sound, whale echolocation type technology, and then figuring out how to translate those into words. It made more sense in the book. And what I will say, and I read more about this before we recorded, is Andy Weir goes to great lengths to have the science in his book make sense. He's not
Okay.
claiming it's all going to be perfect, but he is a software engineer by trade. He's a programmer. He really cares about science. He's not just popping stuff in there that has no basis in science. He wants it to make sense. So I'm sure there's some reality there that made it make a lot more sense in the book. But yeah, in the movie, I was like, they are not chatting yet. Come on.
Yeah, I'm with you on the language thing. It's probably the biggest issue I have that gets just kind of waved away is this sudden first it's like he's learning the language, but I'm like, how does Rocky understand him? That's like the biggest thing that they never address in any way is Rocky seems to understand not only everything that he says, but even like what he needs to be able to like breathe in. Like because he sets up the sort of tunnel to be something where he doesn't need to wear a suit because there is oxygen to breathe. And how he
He's
understands all
very
of this.
advanced.
Yeah, well, he's very old, right? He's over 100 years old,
Mhm.
so he is wise. He's kind of like Yoda in that sense.
Yeah,
There is a little bit of like Grogu, like Baby Yoda from The
for
Mandalorian
sure.
in this, and that like he's cute, but he's like also like
Adorable.
very old, like an elderly rock.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of an issue, and then when they get to the point where they're just having conversations, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it. Like, I can see that, like, yes, he's wearing a pouch now that has, like, a translator in it, and I get
Yeah.
that it could happen really fast, and we need this to work for a movie, so
Mhm.
it's fine. doesn't bug me so much that it like ruins the experience, but it was the first thing that made me kind of roll my eyes a little bit,
Yeah.
other than like some of the humor, which we can talk about. So I'm glad to hear that the book goes into a little more detail of explaining like the how and why behind that. Totally understand why the movie would excise that, because it's boring. It's probably boring to
Yeah.
watch that. I mean, you don't
They
need it, but it
ultimately
just
cut out most scenes that have to do with figuring out the science because that is
yeah,
what had to be cut. And I
which is a
both completely,
contrast,
yeah, to the book where it's just like so much of it is the problem solving. And you feel, I think, in that way,
right?
like so bought into the choices they're making and how they're going to do that. And so I was actually like both completely understood why they cut it because the movie was long enough. We know already that there was a 4 hour cut that we maybe will
Heard
get to
about
see
that.
at some point, would
I do
watch
not. I do not want to watch that.
would watch. But I understand why they did it. But at the same time, I do think, and I'll say most of my friends have read this book, and I think we all shared that feeling that losing some of the problem solving did take away from a little bit of what makes the book so great.
Interesting. And it is in contrast to The Martian, which,
Sure.
I think if you want to put these two movies next to each other and kind of compare them, The Martian is the slightly more adult
Mm,
movie, and Project Hail Mary is more, I don't want to fully call it kid friendly because I don't know how this plays to like a 7-year-old, but I think if you're a preteen, this is probably right up your alley, especially if you like movies or if you like space. And I'm sure there are some kids who would enjoy it because of Rocky. And I think The Martian, the adaptation is just a little more sophisticated in walking
hmm
you through the science, the way that Matt Damon's character has to that's about him surviving on Mars. He's like kind of left for dead on Mars, and needs to figure out how to survive. And you go a little more in depth into the science. It has some of the same kind of like what I would call cheats as Project Hail Mary, in that he's eventually able to communicate with people
The
back on
people.
Earth, and then
Yeah.
and the other astronauts who left him through kind of like a computer that's like hacked into like a hacky way of a computer in like a rover. And
Yeah.
it's the same way that like in Project Hail Mary, he's able to communicate with Rocky through this sort of
Right.
whale sounds or whatever. Which is fine. Like again, not a big deal. They sort of explain it
Right.
enough that you're like, cool, I buy that. But I just think that movie is a little more maybe sophisticated in how it handles the science, even though I'm guessing the books are probably pretty similar in terms of how much science they provide, similar tones. I mean, they are similar
It's
stories. They're both
interesting
about
because this is
survival.
actually I haven't seen The Martian in a little while. I'm really curious to go back and rewatch it now. Um, when you think about it though, this story is actually so much darker at its heart. Like it's
It
about
is.
the
Yeah.
end of humanity. And yet I agree with you. Like I know that this was rated PG-13, but like I have no idea why. Like just
Right.
existential dread maybe. But
But
this
yet
could
this
be
is the crowd
PG
pleaser.
in a heartbeat. Like
Yeah,
there's
this is
just
like
like
the optimistic crowd pleaser, and The Martian is kind of like it is, but like to a different extent.
but I remember there being so much science in The Martian and it being really I mean, he doesn't have a Rocky to play off. Like none of his poop
Right.
potatoes become anamorphized and start talking to him. But
No.
I haven't read The Martian, but from people I've talked to, the books are incredibly similar. And this is what he loves to write. You know, I've read a bunch of interviews with him recently, and he talks about how he wants to write optimistic science fiction. He
Hmm.
wants to write stories that don't pose scientific advancement and technology as the enemy, but the solution.
Mm.
And, you know, I think he understands that the most unrealistic part of his books is people working together, which is
Does
to me the most unrealistic part of this story. But he
yes.
wants to present that better opportunity. It's like, it's really a stated goal.
Does Grace in the book like record videos like in the same way it does in the movie and in The Martian?
I honestly can't remember.
Okay.
I think
I mean, it
so.
makes sense. It's a good device to just be able to have someone talk to the camera and explain what's going on and be like, "Hey, I just met an alien." Like, yeah, you
Yeah.
probably want to say
That
that.
So I will to get a little into the humor. I mean, I remember the book being light and funny. I do
Uh-huh.
not remember it being this funny. And I think a lot of it's the Ryan Gosling of it all. What do you think of his
Yes.
performance?
I thought Gosling was good. I think here's my sort of take on Gosling in this movie. I think he's very good. I think he is playing the Ryan Gosling that we now have come to know and love over the last couple of years. This is kind of the third movie in a row where he's playing this sort of like uh Barbie and the Fall Guy are both very
Is this the
similar to
same character
this.
as Ken, though? I
I
mean, I
mean,
know they're
he's a
both
smarter
funny.
Ken. He's a smarter Ken. I will say that. But
Yeah,
there
I don't
is
know
this
about
sort of
that.
like, I don't know, there's this goofiness and kind of like disaffected like warmth.
Ooh, disaffected warmth. I think that that's actually a really good way to put like his thing.
Yes, there's like an aloofness to him, but yet he also will like bring you in. He's able to kind
Hmm.
of do both at once. And when I say he's playing similar characters, I don't think that Grace and Ken are that similar,
You
but
don't?
the persona the persona is very similar in how he
Okay.
sort of acts, how he presents himself. He does the same thing in The Fall Guy. It's getting away from which I understand because his kids are of a certain age. He wants to do these kind of movies that he can watch with them. He's talked
Sure.
about that. His next film is a Star Wars movie. He's going to be in Starfighter, I think is what it's called, and it's going to be like sort of a spin-off kind of side story where I guess he's playing a starfighter pilot. He's clearly in his like blockbuster era, which
Hmm.
is cool. I'm fine with that. He's also a really gifted dramatic performer who worked with like really cool directors and
Yeah.
would do these like indie films and these like interesting dark, Drive, that's a very dark performance. And I think I just like to see him throw like one of those in here and maybe get
Yeah.
off of this like
I think
streak of
that's
sort of
fair.
just being Ryan Gosling.
He is definitely being Ryan Gosling. Like that is
But it
his
works.
thing. It works. Yeah, I fully agree with you, and it works so well. You are with that. He is the movie. Like you are with that character for so much. This movie would be so bad if the wrong person. I forget which other podcast someone said like, "What if Glenn Powell had been in this role?" And I was just like, "Ugh," like this would have been the worst movie ever.
He could have done it, but I
No,
don't think it would
Rudy.
have been as effective.
You needed the humor worked so well for this movie, and one of the reasons why is because if this movie had been too self-serious and too like we gotta go save the world, it would have been insufferable. And the book isn't like
Yes.
that, and the movie isn't like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why the casting works really well and the humor works really well.
Well, because Gosling doesn't take himself too seriously, and I think Glenn Powell is
Nope.
very funny, but he also can take himself too seriously.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that like I don't think he would have been as good. I would be
Hmm.
interested to see if he could pull it off, but I don't think this movie works without someone like Gosling at
Yeah.
the center because you need someone who I guess put glasses on him and he's viable as a really smart guy. But
Do
you
you want
need
do
someone
you want to wear your
who's
glasses
yeah.
like he
Should
wears
I wear
them
him
in the
like
movie?
crooked?
Just like down to here.
You need someone who can play both dumb and smart and can have that sort of relationship with Rocky that is central to it, where it is Gosling has this like childlike character about him. And you
Mhm.
need to have this childlike enthusiasm to bond with a talking alien rock. Like you kind of just need to
Great.
have that.
Now you understand why when I read this, I thought this needs to be a movie. How the hell are they going to do it? So in general, this is an unbelievably true adaptation to the book. Like probably one
Right.
of the most like direct adaptations I've seen in a little while, but there are a couple of things which I think I stand out if we want to take a second
Yes.
to chat through
I would
those.
love okay, so, like, do you wanna talk about why he gets sent eventually? Because like, that's kind of the big key one of the big key things that is left out of the
Yes.
movie, right? So, like, to talk about the movie for a second, he only goes to space because there is an explosion that while they're like kind of preparing for space, he's not supposed to go. He's just helping kind of prep everything. And that is where we get just to sidebar for a second before we get to this difference. We
Please.
get the amazing scene where they're sort of like preparing for the mission and they need to blow off some steam one night. So they go to karaoke. And I know Sophie, this
It's
scene has meant a lot to you. So I'll let you take it.
I love the Sign of the Times Harry Style drop that Sandra Hüller does singing. And that's a scene that's brought in for the movie. I think just such a
She's a
perfect
great singer.
example. Great singer, lovely, perfect song choice. She chose it herself.
Yeah.
And I think this is a perfect
Oh,
example
really?
of, yeah, she chose it herself. Of adding a scene that does not exist in a book to have a moment in a movie and doing it perfectly and using the actress there perfectly. You know, that character in the book, we miss, like I said earlier, a lot of key scenes where you sort of see her
Hmm.
power, but I don't think we get a humanizing scene like this.
Yeah.
And to me, that's maybe the most
It's
one
very
dimensional.
crucial.
Yeah, it's the most maybe one dimensional character in the book. And I think that this really made her three dimensional in a way that Andy Weir didn't. And so I love seeing something like that in an adaptation.
Do you think that they actually improved on that character by casting her and giving her that
I do.
scene where she gets to sing? Yeah, that's what it sounds like. That's cool.
I wish that's one of the reasons I wish we kind of had those other scenes is because I think she would have been so good in them
Right.
and it would have
Right.
made the character even richer. But yeah, I think she really blows that character out of the water.
So after that explosion, after we lose both the backups and the two scientists who
Mhm.
were slated to go. I believe there's three different disciplines that are supposed to go up into space. There's an engineer played by Milana Weintraub, aka Lily, the AT&T girl, and there is the captain, the commander Ken Leung, who's from industry. And
Yeah, he
he's
is.
Chinese, and so this is a little bit about all the nations coming together, which I do want to talk about in a bit. But yeah, the backups die in this explosion, and they need someone else, and he knows how to do it. He kind of like he's maybe not qualified in that he's not trained to be
He's
an
not an
astronaut,
astronaut. Yeah.
but he at least knows the work that needs to be done. And then this is like the other thing that's kind of a little crazy and a bit improbable is that they essentially like drug him and put him in space. Like
Yeah, they
he
do.
doesn't want to go. He's like they talk about how he has no one at home. He has no reason to stay. There is some like very mild like sexual tension between him and Sandra Culler's character, but very very mild, very like this is
Very
a
mild.
PG-13 family movie. But like he has no one.
Mhm.
And they're like, it's, yeah, we know it's a suicide mission, but like you're trying to save the world. Like, can't you like either you die and the whole world maybe gets saved, or you don't go and everyone dies. He's like, yeah, but I
And
could
he's
live
like,
for
"No,
like another
thank
20
you."
years.
He's like, I'm gonna pass on that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Like, I have a really great cardigan on, and I just will
Yeah.
not be participating. Thank you
So
so
they drug him
much."
and send him to space. But there's a reason that the movie leaves out as to why he is chosen
I don't
beyond
understand
his
why they left this
expertise.
out. They could have explained it in one sentence. So in the book, you need a special coma resistant gene marker to allow you to survive the coma process that is needed to get out into space as long as they're going to be out there.
Oh.
And so everyone has been tested on Earth for this coma resistant gene marker, which is how they found the people to come do it. And then you
Oh.
find out, like, as a just comment earlier, that it's like, oh, Ryland Grace, like, you happen to have it. So it's not just that he's the scientist, it's that he also has the gene marker to survive it, which makes him such an obvious choice. And it's like, you
That seems
could have added
important.
that in like two sentences and it would have made it make even more
I'm
sense.
sure there's a cut where Eva Straight says that to him
Yeah.
or something like that, and they just like felt it wasn't necessary in an already 2 hour and
Yeah.
36-minute movie. They were like, we can just leave that out.
That was one of the like bigger details. It's not even a plot point, it's just a detail from the
So
book.
what else is notable that's different or just left out from the book?
Yeah, there's a couple, and again, they're all pretty minor. So, I mean, minor when it comes to the actual plot of the book. It's really more
Sure,
like
sure.
richness and details around the world. So, a big one is you learn how much Earth is sort of like working and working together to try to slow the effects of the astrophy eating the sun. So, what they
Okay.
essentially do
Okay.
is try to make global warming worse to raise the temperature to then because the temperature is going to get lowered by the sun going away. So they nuke Antarctica. They tear down all these
Oh,
rainforests.
just gonna nuke
Yeah,
Antarctica and just okay, cool.
they nuke Antarctica. And this is how you realize how powerful Eva Strout is she's just like, yeah, we're going to go do all this stuff. And so Yeah, and also like doesn't go very well. But I feel like that the coma resistant gene marker and then just kind of the changes in Eva Strout throughout are the changes they made. Like
Sure, sure.
little scenes here and there, but this is really the only things that are different are mostly just things that are omitted for time.
Mm,
There's also a small difference at the end, and I've actually seen different people like write about this differently. So I want to make sure I
okay.
say it right, which is that I think there's some differential in like the fuel amount that he has at the end when he
Uh,
makes the
sure.
decision to go get Rocky. So I don't think there was ever a chance he was going to really go home in the book.
Okay.
Whereas in the
Interesting.
movie, it's more like he's making this big choice. They add like a little bit more weight onto the
Right.
end there. But again, I mean, it is so true to the book in general. Like I read the book a couple of years ago and watching the movie, it was like, oh yeah, that plot point, that plot point, that plot
Sure,
point. Like
sure.
they really stay true to it.
Well, and the movie has kind of what feels like two endings, maybe three endings, right? There's kind of like he
Yeah.
successfully. So we've kind of zoomed past a few things that happen. I mean, I think a crucial thing that happens is that Rocky kind of like moves into the ship for a period of time, like very he's very pushy about it. He's like, I
He's
come to
so
the ship
funny.
now. I can't remember the
Messy,
quote, but
messy,
it's a very
bad. Why
funny.
so dirty?
Yeah, and he's like going through all the different rooms, and they like basically build these like shell cage, glass
Hmm.
cage tube things for him to travel through. And so they're hanging out on the ship for a while, kind of trying to figure out how to solve this problem, how to save both Earth and the planet that Rocky's
What's it
wife is on,
called?
right? She's on Adrian. That's the planet that she's on.
Yes, Adrian
So they
is the
call
planet.
Adrian because of the movie. And so Rocky's trying to get back home, but he's also trying to solve this problem. And Grace obviously wants to go home. There at different points he remembers what's happening and doesn't remember what's happening. And then there's like a couple of big emotional moments, a couple of big kind of like endings. There's the moment where Grace kind of gets knocked out and Rocky saves him, which is a really emotional moment. You kind of think both of them might die because Rocky leaves the chamber and he can't breathe oxygen
It's a lot of
without.
space peril, is what I call this, just
Yeah,
like
space
classic
peril.
space peril, which is honestly not my favorite genre. A movie like Gravity, where I'm like, I understand this is a cinematic masterpiece, but I'm just watching space peril for 2.5 hours, is not really my favorite genre. So I feel like they do a good job in this of sort of balancing all that out. And I think, most importantly, plot wise, they find the
Yeah,
solution, which is essentially this stuff which can destroy the astrophage. And so they're
right.
able to send it on
Yep,
the little motorized rocket ships back to Earth to try and
right.
give them the solution. And something I don't understand, to be honest, from the book or the movie is like, now that they have that, like, what do you do with it? Do you like shoot it up into space? Like,
No idea. They don't
what
really talk
happens
about that.
now?
Well, and
That isn't
like
also not in the book.
and he has to use most of his fuel for that, but then Rocky's like, I can make you more fuel. I don't know how, but he can. Or I guess he can give you more fuel.
He
I don't know.
has
It's something like that.
extra.
He's got extra.
He has
That's right.
extra because he didn't understand relativity.
Right. And at one point he like fixes like these broken parts of the ship and it's just again kind of like, oh yeah, I just fixed it. We're like,
It's actually
okay,
a very
sure.
interesting part of the book, which I feel like they kind of skirt over in the movie, is the two of them understanding like what their planets understand science as. So
Mm,
Rocky's planet is really advanced in certain ways, but they don't understand radiation, which is why all the people on his ship die. He doesn't understand relativity and like how time folds into itself. And then they have all these like substances that can build these amazing ships, but they don't understand these very basic scientific principles. So in the book, you really see the two of them like teaching each other about these things.
and then we ultimately get to kind of the main ending. And there's an amazing, wonderful emotional moment between Rocky and Grace, where Rocky is kind of nursed back to health. I'm not 100% sure how he gets nursed back to health. I don't really remember,
I
but
think he just
they
recovers
hug.
over time.
Yeah, and they have this cute couple of moments where they they hug through the glass, and it's very nice. And Grace is heading home. He's got enough fuel. He's going to head back to enjoy Earth. Now that he's saved it, he's going to come back a hero until he realizes that Rocky is in trouble, and that only he can save
They
Rocky.
made
And
resistant tau. Oh my God, why do I remember this? They made
I love
resistant
it.
atrophy resistant tau amoeba,
You can
which
tell neither of us did well in science classes.
no, we are too hilarious since we just worked in tech for years, but we are writers by heart. Um, and so basically what happens is like the fuel is being eaten by the solution. It like got
Yes,
out and is now eating his fuel and he's not going to realize. And so he's going to be caught in space. And so Ryland Grace says, we gotta go get Rocky. And I got
he
very
goes
excited.
back, and then yeah, and then he saves Rocky, and Grace moves to Adrian, I guess, or
To Adrian.
right? Is that
Yeah.
yeah? That's where they end up, and they kind of create an Earth on Adrian for him, and it ends with this cool scene where like he's teaching all
Little
the,
rock
the
guys.
little aliens science. Ultimately I think that's what he wanted to be, was just a middle school science teacher, and he gets to continue that on, and it's all about how he finally found someone, right? He'd been alone pretty much it seemed like his entire life. He didn't really have anybody, and with Rocky he kind of finds his
He
person,
doesn't
if
really
you
want to
will.
go home now. Like
Yeah,
he basically
he's
says
happy.
like I'm good. I can just like hang out here on my little planet and be a science teacher to the
And so
rocks.
it's a very crowd pleasing, optimistic, hopeful
Yes.
ending. And this is a little bit of what I brushed up against is I think there is a very, and it's the same in The Martian, there's a very Obama era, like hope,
Hope core.
optimism, hope core, hopium, like whatever you want to call it, that I just like have a hard time in 2026 like believing. Like I just struggle with the idea. Like there's
Sure.
a scene where they're all on like a base, and it's representatives from like all these different countries, and they're all getting along. They're all,
Yeah.
figuring out how to solve this problem. And I'm like, maybe this is a me in 2026 problem, but I felt the same way when I went to a screening of Apollo 13 last year, which like is another movie that I think Project Hail Mary owes a
Totally.
bit to. It's just so hard to believe that the world would come together in a US led effort to save like the entire world when everything we see in reality suggests that would
Yeah.
never happen and we'd be doomed. Um, but again, it's a movie, so that's like part of it. It's fiction, but I don't
I
know.
think you have. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's definitely the most to me,
It's
the science isn't unbelievable. The fact that
funny
everyone
that
would work together is
that's
the
the
unbelievable
suspension of
part.
disbelief. That is the
Oh,
hardest suspension
totally.
of disbelief for me, is the idea that people would come together to try to save the world. Like we're literally experiencing that
We're in
right
it
now, and we
right
don't
now.
really do anything.
Right, but what's the alternative? We make a movie like Don't Look Up, and it's like, oh my
Yes, which
God, it's a
is
metaphor for climate change.
I know. Yeah.
Wow. So
No, I
yeah, I
think
basically don't disagree with you in any way. And yet the movie was so good I didn't care. And I think that's
sure.
sort of what I mean about how much they needed to get Rocky and Ryan Gosling and the humor and the practical effects right. Because if this was bad, it would be so bad. And then I would have found that Hope Core excruciating. But I
Right.
think because of how big of a challenge it was to make the movie, but what they did, how they made it like allowed me to believe in the Hope Core a little bit more because I was actually like viewing it pay off. And please know I
Fair
am not
enough.
making a comparison of the end of the world in science to making a singular Hollywood movie, but that really helped me buy into it.
Sure. And that is totally fair. And I respect that. The humor too also feels very like Obama era, like millennial core, like humor that I think it mostly works, but there is this like weird mixture of like sincere, we are saving the world, we have a mission, emotional core, like very serious. And also, we're just kind of doing like goofy, snarky, like millennial humor that like just sort of again didn't
Hmm.
fully fit for me. But these are nitpicks, right? These are just things that like maybe
Totally.
kept me from like, it keeps it from being like it's like a 4-star movie to me instead of like a 4.5-star movie, right? Just keeps me
Sure.
at a slight arm's length of my personal connection to this. And it's easy to
Yeah.
nitpick when something is good because you can kind of find these little things to be like, well, that didn't, maybe it's a little too pastiche because it's borrowing from all these
Definitely.
things. Maybe the humor isn't quite there. But that's okay.
For sure. I mean, I love being able to critique the little stuff because it means I don't have to be like, "Oh, I just hated this." No, I was so pleasantly surprised by just what they did with this, and it's been really fun to watch people react to it.
We haven't talked a lot about the filmmakers or the screenwriter who did a really good job adapting this. I mean, we
Mhm.
can't deny that. Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I don't know your relationship with them, Sophie, but I used to watch a show on MTV from like the early 2000s. It was animated called Clone High that they
My god.
co-created with Bill Lawrence, the creator of Ted Lasso and Shrinking and
Oh,
Scrubs and
cool.
all these other shows. And I remember liking that show, and it's been kind of fun to watch them come into their own as filmmakers. I have never seen the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs movies, but I know that those are very popular, and
Me
they did
neither.
those. 21 and 22 Jump Street, the revival of 21 Jump Street with Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill. Those are really fun,
Mhm.
really surprisingly good movies. Of course, they brought us the Lego movie, which is also again a really fun kind of twist on IP. They were
Mhm.
kind of executive producers of, I don't know if you ever watched The Last Man on Earth, the TV show with Will Forte.
Well, oh, I know what you're talking
Um,
about, yeah.
yeah, it's another like kind of lone man sci-fi sort of thing. So I think, they had a little experience in this. And then Drew Goddard, who wrote the script, adapted it just like he did on The Martian. He has written on many of millennial favorite TV shows. So I don't know, Sophie, if you were a fan of any of these, but he wrote on Buffy. He wrote on Angel.
Sure.
He wrote on Alias, Lost, and The Good Place.
Oh, nice.
So he's got a long kind of history of Joss Whedon-y kind of uh humor and drama. And he also wrote and directed The Cabin in the Woods, which is a great horror film if you've never seen it. And I've never seen Bad Times at the El Royale, but that's his other movie that he directed, which is apparently bad. Wrote Cloverfield, wrote World War Z. So I think he did a
Oh,
clearly
World
clearly
War
he
Z, that's interesting.
understands clearly he understands like Andy Weir's style because he did this 10 years ago with The Martian and
Yeah,
knows how to kind of like make that work. It's you can understand where some of like the quippy humor comes from when you look at his background
totally.
in TV writing, and why maybe he infused the script with more of that than was in the book. And again, yeah, like they directed the hell out of this thing. It looks great. It was shot by Greg Fraser, the cinematographer who did
Unbelievable.
cinematography for Dune and the Batman. And what's interesting is Dune is a space movie that mostly takes place on planets. And this is a space movie that mostly takes place on space. And I do have to shout out, I assume this was, I don't know if this was a cinematographer or director thing, but one of my favorite scenes in what is very much an homage to 2001 A Space Odyssey is there's sort of like an overhead shot of Rocky's ship and Grace's ship, and they look like little
Little
models. Yeah.
Yes, I love that.
And you kind of watch them moving like very fast, almost like stop motion. And like,
Yep.
if you've never seen 2001, those are models that are filmed. So like, but
Yeah.
look real enough. And like, it's cool, like to see that done in a movie like this, where it's kind of played for laughs, I think,
Oh, for sure.
purposefully. But it's like a very cool, cute moment. And, I guess the astrophage is where it's all like psychedelic. Like that was
It got
cool.
me. Look, the sparkly pink scene really,
Yeah, it
and it's
looked
interesting because
great.
he says, like, "I'm having a moment." I was like, "I feel like I'm having a
Yeah.
moment." And this is
Yeah.
that to me is such an example of, like, yeah, that didn't hit the same way in the book. You're just
Of
like, "Ooh,
course, of
I'm
course.
floating around." And so what a fun moment to get to watch them bring it to life.
Well,
And I don't know if you've seen stuff about how they filmed it, but it was like a light box that they filmed in. Yeah, they filmed in an actual light box, and then they ran liquid down some of the,
oh,
plates to, like,
cool. Oh,
give it this
yeah.
it's
So it
very
was kinda
cool, and
like a liquid light show.
mhm. It's
Yeah, I've seen that.
so amazing. I just look, I'm obviously the book person here, but every once in a while, it's like your imagination can only take you so
Well,
far, and
this
to
is
see
where
someone
a
really turn that visual
right.
in
This is where a movie can
is
improve
amazing.
on the book in some ways, and
Yeah.
I've been to concerts where they're doing, like, liquid light projections, and it's really cool. It looks super trippy and awesome, and plus you get the score.
The score is great. I am just
Daniel
glad that they
Pemberton's
took
score is really
time.
good.
I hate when they rush a project and don't do it
Yeah.
right because they wanna catch the book. fire and something like this really needed. I think they said he got it before
Hmm.
publication, so probably in 2020, maybe
Yeah,
early
yeah.
2021. This movie needed 5 years to be done right, and I'm glad they took the time and spent the money to do it. It's obviously going to pay off for them.
Yeah, why do you think, Sophie, this is caught on so much? I've been trying to think about that, like, what has made this, like, what we might call today, like, a 4 quadrant hit, right? Like, it's kind of reaching
Yeah.
everyone. It's bringing, like, the people who maybe only go to 1 or 2 movies a year out. It's seemingly, like, quote, unquote, "original," right? I mean, I think
Mhm.
whenever we're talking about
Totally.
an adaptation of a book, it's kind of viewed as original to a movie audience. Like, it's
For sure.
IP in, like, the Superman sense,
No.
and so some people are taking a chance, right? Like, not everyone who saw this movie read this book, so why
Yeah.
do you think this is, like, resonating with audiences and becoming such a sensation?
I think Ryan Gosling helps a lot. I think there are
Yes, of
genuinely
course.
so many Ryan Gosling fans who will just sort of see anything. I
Well,
also
but
think this
he the Fall Guy didn't do as well last
It's
year
true,
2
it's
years
true.
ago.
I think it's
So
a
he
so I think that's an
Yeah.
ingredient. Fall Guy, great movie,
I
criminally
thought The Fall Guy was
underrated.
great. Yeah, same.
So funny. But I think too, the book is a huge success, and I would call
Yeah.
this book one of the rare ones. Like, I have recommended this book to every person in my life, and I would continue
Mm.
doing it to anyone, like my uncle, my dad, my
It just has
boyfriend.
mass appeal. It's the kinda thing that can appeal
Men
to
and
everyone.
fiction is like a conversation we're probably gonna end up having on a lot of podcasts. Like, men do not statistically read nearly as much fiction as women. This kind of book is the exception. This book
Sure.
is read by every single person's uncle, let me tell
Big
you, and,
dad
like,
vibes,
that's
yeah.
big dad vibes, but, like, that's how a book like this really breaks out, is that it appeals to them, and me and all my girlfriends have read it.
You picture, like, a bearded man with a single tear as he closes the book, like,
I
"That was
do. I
beautiful."
really do. I I hope it's a beautiful moment for them. Share this great Father's Day gift for your dad. He
Yeah,
will love
yeah,
it, and you can borrow it after. It kind of is
yeah.
the rarer novel that transcends all those groups in the same way.
And as a movie, it's really the kind of movie we don't get as much anymore. Like, we don't get these movies that are pitched at a wide audience like this, where it can potentially appeal to a 10-year-old and an
Totally.
80-year-old, and everyone in between. And I think that's what's interesting. And you see on social media, like, the people doing, like, the Rocky, like, thumbs down, fist my bump, the
Yeah.
goodbye. You can't see it, but the goodbye thing. There are memeable or at least quotable moments in the film that I think helps it maybe appeal to, like, a slightly younger than us demographic.
Rudy, wouldn't you say
It's yeah.
too, as like a film person, that this really has both critical and commercial appeal, especially because
Yes.
it was so
Yes.
tactfully film made? I feel
Yes.
like there's a lot of like big film, like I'm just excited about the filmmaking of this people
Yes.
on my feed as much as the people who are like me and my kids loved this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it as well, is it's like it's we used to get a couple of these every year. I think
Mhm.
Apollo 13 is a great example of, like, again, another space movie about people coming together to, like, save people. But we used to get these all the time, and so it feels refreshing to get this in the first quarter of the year, instead of, this isn't like a summer blockbuster, which is interesting
Right.
because this could have very well been a summer blockbuster, but actually they kind of, I think, look, you do not have to hand it to Jeff Bezos in any way. I have already been fired by him once, at a previous
Did your
job,
theater my theater
but
kind of like lightly booed when it came up like an Amazon
oh, that's
production.
funny.
Everyone was kind of like, "Ugh."
But Amazon MGM, which is trying to sort of, like, fill the gap that has been left with some of these larger studios kind of downsizing a bit or exiting entirely, like, they're going to start putting out, and they have this year, like, 12 movies a year, 12, like, bigger
Yep.
movies a year they're going to put in
Good.
theaters. They did a really good job of marketing this film, of
Mhm.
positioning it. Like, they probably took a gamble putting this in March because it could have failed and it worked. And,
It
like,
really worked.
I am curious the lessons that both Hollywood and the book industry will take away from something like this being so successful. Like, do we think that they're going to take more risks on adapting sci-fi stories or make maybe more accessible sci-fi stories? Are they just going to go into like, we're going to try to make more movies that are cute but also inspirational and appeal to dads? Like
I'm
typically
sure
we're
they'll
probably
take
going to
the
take
right, yeah,
right,
the
we're
right
going to take the
lesson, I'm
wrong
sure.
lessons. But like, or do you think we're going to get a rash of like books greenlit that are like
I really
adjacent to
hope
this?
I really hope the lesson that's taken from this is just how much people want practical effects and how much
Mm,
people want
mm.
things that feel real. I was
And
really
human stories,
human stories. I think I was really struck by
even
all
when
the
there's an alien.
trailers. Even when there's an alien, I consider Rocky very human in my heart. There were so many trailers before the movie that, were other sci-fi things coming out
Oh
and
yeah,
they
like
looked
what? What did you see?
doing something
Hmm,
else.
hmm.
I'm one of those people that like turns to the person next to me and I'm just like, oh, that looks bad, like
Yeah,
stupid. But I was really struck at how much I didn't want to see those movies and how fake they looked and just how
sure, sure.
uninteresting. Whereas I found this to be so thoroughly charming. So I would hope that the lesson here is to put time and effort and that like it pays off. I'm sure that won't be the lesson learned. But I'm always really curious about when you have an author like Andy Weir, who now clearly it's like they're just waiting for his next book to be written. He's currently working on his next novel, which is a standalone, but they're
Oh,
already talking about a potential sequel after that. And
oh, interest sequel to what?
to Project Hail Mary, I've seen both
No,
Andy Weir and the
no, we
studio
don't
mention it.
need that.
Don't even, this is my biggest pet peeve in the world when they give us like an unauthorized sequel.
Like,
But he's
what's
currently
it?
working on a, would you say?
Is it going to be like life on Adrian, and then he tries to go home to Earth? Ugh,
I really
please
don't want
no.
to know. I don't want to find
Yeah.
out, but he said he has thoughts, but he's currently
Okay.
working on a standalone. And I am sure there's 1 million producers and agents like waiting for it. So I'm always curious when you have an author like
Right.
this who their work is automatically just being optioned, most likely before it's ever published. And I'm always very curious about that process and that relationship.
Well, you mentioned earlier that Artemis was not as well received. However, Lord and Miller have actually been developing that since 2017, and they still plan to direct it. What I think is different, so like that could be their follow up to this, is Artemis.
Mhm.
What's different about Artemis, it seems to me, is that it's not about a guy trapped in space trying to get home,
It is not about that. No, it's a
which is
female
interesting.
protagonist.
Also,
And
maybe why it
apparently,
didn't work. I don't know.
she's apparently super unlikable. That's what I've seen the feedback. I did not read it, but I really remember when
So
that book came out and people were like, "Ugh."
So he writes about a woman and she's unlikable.
Yes, well, we don't have time to unpack all that, but no, I
Yeah.
mean
We don't have to get into
this guy like can do whatever he wants now. Like
yeah.
I'm
Well,
sure that Valentine is like
yeah.
clawing waiting for this book
He
and
he got into
yeah.
some trouble this week because he was
What'd
talking
he
about
do?
Star Trek.
Oh,
And
good
he's
God.
apparently a big Trekkie. He loves Star Trek. And he was rejected by Paramount to write something for Star Trek. And then he started complaining about how Star Trek has been bad for many years. And like, look, I used to watch Star Trek growing up with my parents,
Right.
so like it's close, I hold it close, but like I haven't really been paying attention to what they've been doing with that franchise in recent years. He also got in trouble for kind of saying something about not wanting to shove identity politics into his work, and
I'm
you
sure that was
know,
taken super in context.
I mean, yes and no. It was on a YouTube show called The Critical Drinker, so take what you will from that. And I think he's been running damage control since then.
Yeah. I have a pretty high bar for like after working in publishing. And for
Sure.
anyone who doesn't know, I used to run social media for Random House for I think 6.5 years. And so authors saying things and them
Yeah.
being taken either in or out of context was so much of my job just watching that all go down. And it's interesting, Rudy. I think that that probably connects to some other like critique I've seen of him, not like in this same light, but people critiquing the book for being sort of like science slop, like
Mm,
just slop, not being particularly well written, being too commercial. And I think
mm.
in the same way, like not engaging on certain issues, like really being run of
Sure. Sure.
center of the road on a lot of things. And, obviously, of course, everyone entitled to their own opinion. I feel
Right.
like with the amount of information I have, my reaction to that, not having read everything he's ever said, is that's just not the point of his books and it's not what he's trying to achieve.
And
And
that's
he is
fine.
really
Yeah.
good at what he does. And I'd so much rather that than him put a bunch of diverse characters in a book who
Right.
he is not qualified to write about. And then we have a scandal in a different way. Like he's
Yes.
the
And
science dude. He says in interviews that the Matt Damon character in The Martian is like based on him, like as
mm,
a person. He is writing
yeah, yeah.
so much from his own perspective as a science dude, and they make really fun, enjoyable books. And unless he's claiming that's the only perspective, it really doesn't bother me.
Anything else that you want to say about Project Hail Mary before we wrap up?
I think we covered it, which is just, it was really fun to engage in this work. And I love, the book is obviously selling like hotcakes right now. And
Oh,
I
I'm
think that's
sure.
great. I'm always, happy for my former employer, Penguin Random House, when they have
Well,
these big books that help fund all the other books they publish. So I'm sure they're
yeah.
really happy with the success of this movie right now.
And that's kind of a cool thing about these adaptations is that when they work, it kind of goes both ways, where it brings people in who
Totally.
weren't familiar and then they go back and read the book, or it brings people who read the book and want to see the movie in, and maybe they'll go back and read the book too after watching the movie one or two or three or however many times they choose
Yeah.
to. So I'm very curious then for our final segment on the podcast, and this is of course based on a movie that is based on a book. This is Sophie's Choice, where Sophie determines which was better in her opinion, the book or the movie.
This was so hard, Rudy. I really, really struggled with this one, which tells you how much I love the movie. And I will say, I had an amazing moment in the theater when, about 45 minutes in, the two girls sitting next to me, and one turns to the other and says, "Oh my God, is the book this good?" And I was like, "Is this really happening?" And I lean over, I was like, "Yes, read it." And so this might surprise people. I think the movie's better.
Whoa! Wow. We have our first movie is
I
better. I
think it's
love it.
better.
This is great.
And I love the book too, but the visuals and the way in which they
Yeah.
brought this world to life, like that astrophy scene and the one where you sort of see Tau, whatever
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
called, the big planet, are what did it for me. Like I
Yeah.
felt movie magic in the way
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
why I go to theaters and why I want that experience. And I hadn't eaten a large edible. Like that was just my body having that response. Whereas like I freaking love the book. I raced through it, but I did not have the
Yeah.
emotional connection in the same way. And so I think just because of the skill it took to do it and the
Right.
difficulty curve, I think the movie is better. What I would say, if you have seen the movie and you are thinking about reading the book, if you saw the movie and you said, "I love this, I feel good with this world,
Hmm.
great experience," I don't think you need to read the book. If you saw
Interesting.
the movie
Hmm.
and you really want to still be in this world and you want to figure out more of the backstory and you just feel like you want to engage with these characters more, absolutely go read the book. You'll get so
Right.
much fun, detail and backstory and little stuff you didn't know if you are still craving more of this world, for sure. But I don't think if you feel satisfied by the movie and that's good for you, you're probably good.
I like that. Yeah. And I think this is one that you like, I can speak to this. You really don't have to read the book to buy in and enjoy this. Like it
Definitely
sets
not.
everything up really well. Like it is not at all required. But glad to hear that the movie won out this time, a rarity. And it's not
Yeah.
just because you really enjoyed it, but you actually feel like this was also a faithful, for the most part, adaptation.
It's
It kind of was like a
incredibly
combination of the
faithful.
two things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Right
they
on.
just did such a beautiful job bringing it to life. I mean, I haven't met anyone who's read the book who doesn't seem happy with the movie yet, which can't remember the last time that was. So, yeah, I'm kind
Yeah.
of just like grateful to the people who took the time and energy to make this like with respect and so beautifully. It was really fun to see. And I've also just really enjoyed the press tour. I've enjoyed, my feeds talking about it. I love monoculture. I love when we all kind of come together around a big property. And this feels like one of the first big ones this year. I've really enjoyed it.
It Was a Book First is hosted and produced by Sophie Vershbow and Rudi Greenberg. Music written by Cliff Blum and John Connolly, produced by Kevin Pons. Logo by Trisha Louise Prieto. Website by Kevin Fobb. Follow us on Instagram at It Was a Book First Pod, and we'll see you next week.